Do you ever find that your motivation to sell and to just pick up that phone is elusive? Let's face it, the world of selling is hard. If it were easy, more people would be doing it. There's a reason that salespeople are some of the highest paid executives in the business world today. And that big reason is really just that it's not always easy to find that motivation. Most people get really scared to do some of the things that we need to be doing on a daily basis. And you know what? That can catch up to all of us. In this video, I'm going to show you 11 sales motivation ideas to get you to make that next call. Check it out. Number 1, get clear on why you need to be successful. Now, I have always said that there is no such thing as a professional goal in sales. Everything is personal. Everything comes down to why do you need to pick up that phone to close that sale, to ultimately pay that bill, or send your kid to college, or save for a down payment on a house, or whatever it is. Everything in sales is personal. And the more you can get clear on the why you need to be successful, the more successful you're going to be. Because it really is just a set of small steps, and every single step needs to make you feel like you're getting that much closer to accomplishing whatever it is that you want. Get super crystal clear. When I first began selling, I had to make tons of cold calls every single day, and I didn't want to do that. So what did I do? I literally had a vision board of all of the things that I knew that I wanted in my life, whether it was that new house or money for my family or whatever it is. I knew exactly what it was. So every time I picked up that phone, every time I set a new meeting, it was getting me that much closer to my personal why. Number 2, know exactly what you have to sell in order to achieve your personal goals. Now notice I didn't use the word quota, or I didn't use some word like a professional goal, right? What matters is that you need to get exactly specific on really what you need to sell in order to achieve your personal goals. Let me give you an example. Let's say that in order to really accomplish your personal goals, you need to make $200,000. You should, as a salesperson, know exactly what is going to get you to that earnings of $200,000. That means factoring in your compensation plan, or if you have your own company, exactly what you need to sell in order to personally earn that $200,000. And then once you know that, it all becomes about getting to that number. Everything matters when it comes to getting to that personal savings or that personal amount of earnings, whether it's, let's say it's $200,000, and so you know that you need to make $2 million in sales in order to get to that $200,000. Know that and live by that number, because that's the only number that matters. It's not about your quota. It's not about some number that someone gives you. It's about you knowing what you need to sell in order to achieve those personal goals. And I think, as you can see here, there's starting to be a pattern that emerges, that everything that you're doing is getting you to that personal goal. And make those personal goals really powerful, really relevant. Not just buy that fancy car, but what are some things that are really going to drive you, so that way when you're not in the mood, which you're likely to not be in the mood to pick up that phone, what's going to give you that kick in the ass to make that next call, to set that next meeting, to knock on that next door. Number 3, break down the activities on a daily basis. I find that so many salespeople can get really overwhelmed by how much they really need to be doing in order to actually accomplish their goals. And so what happens is that a lot of people get into this pattern where they'll put off those sales activities for a day or two. So let's say Monday and Tuesday, they don't really make any calls, or they don't really do any of those key prospecting activities that they need to do in order to hit their numbers. So that way, by the time they're at Wednesday, they're already behind. And so now they have to do this Herculean effort in order to really get that much closer to their sales goals. So what I challenge you to do is really break down to a very granular, daily basis. Know exactly how many calls you need to make. Know exactly how many referrals or introductions you need to ask for. Know exactly how many meetings you need to set and how many meetings you have to conduct in order to hit your goals. The more you can break things down into a daily basis, into bite-sized chunks, the more manageable achieving your personal goals become, and the more likely you are to really feel that motivation, because it's not that there's some magical feeling of motivation. Motivated people aren't necessarily on a daily basis feeling like, oh gee, I can't wait to do today. I can't wait to make those calls. No. What they're doing is they're understanding what they have to do on a daily basis, and then they're just taking action. They're just following through. Number 4, make your activity the most important objective of each day. This is something that so many salespeople really miss the boat on, because what they're focused on is making sure that they're hitting their sales numbers on a weekly basis or on a monthly basis. But really what matters is your sales activity. Just think, there really are only a couple of factors that go into making sure that you're hitting your sales number, right? You've got to make sure that you're getting the number of leads that you need. And the way you get those leads is by generating activity. And then once you have those leads, you have to make sure that you're doing the right thing in the sales process to make sure that you actually are closing those sales effectively. But let's just control for that. Let's just pretend that you're doing those right things, right? You've watched all of my other videos, you've gone through all of my programs, and you make sure that you're doing the right things when you actually have someone in front of you. So now it comes down to, well, what are you actually doing on that daily basis to make sure that you're getting in front of the right number of people? The most important thing that you can be doing on a daily basis is ensuring that you are following through with your activity goals, right? You know exactly how many calls you have to make, and you do not leave the office until you've made those calls. The better you are at holding yourself accountable to the activities, the more likely you are to hit your sales numbers. In fact, it's not about likelihood, right? It's if you follow through on those activities, you will hit your sales goals. And so really all that matters on that daily basis is doing that activity, is following through on those steps. Number 5, delegate non-sales activity to others. Now, this is really the flip side of the previous idea, which is that what really matters is doing sales activity. And so many salespeople get bogged down in these non-sales activities. Now, I understand that some people's jobs isn't 100% sales. But even so, the more time you can dedicate to true sales activity, the more money you're going to be making. So that means take all of the non-sales activity off of your plate. Get rid of it, move it away, give it to someone else. They can take care of it. What you want to focus on is what's going to make you money, which is sales activity. And so think about, what are those activities that you're doing during the day that are not sales related? Maybe it's operational issues. Maybe it's putting out fires here and there. Maybe it's customer complaints. Whatever it is, the more you can give that to someone else, the more money you're going to make. And more importantly, the more money you're going to be worth to your company. And so you become a complete necessity to any company if you can focus the majority of your time on that sales activity. Get rid of everything else that is not sales related. Number 6, use a selling system that actually works. Success reinforces motivation. There is nothing more discouraging that I see than people who are actually going out and doing things, but because they're not using the right approaches, all of that effort is really wasted. This happens in learning any skill. Let's say you are going to learn guitar, right? And you are self-taught and you just are learning guitar, but you actually have the guitar upside down. I actually know someone who learned to play guitar essentially upside down. And the problem was that it takes so much longer to learn to play guitar upside down. Selling is really not entirely different, right? If we are learning to sell in a way that's really not as effective as it could be, then we're less likely to feel motivated because we're not having success. Let's take a cold call, for example, which you may or may not be doing, but cold calls on average are going to have between a 0.5% and a 1.5% likelihood of actually generating a meeting. Now, that being the case, if you are ineffective with prospecting calls, that means you might have to be making 200 cold calls in order to just generate one meeting. Versus if you're actually more effective, you could be generating a meeting every 75 or so calls that you're making. That's a huge difference. And the person who is generating more meetings from the same amount of activity is going to feel a lot more motivation just because they're feeling that success. The more you're putting yourself in the position of actually being successful, the more reinforcing and more motivating that feels. So make sure that when you're actually selling, that you're using a system that really is working. And I have a million other videos that you can watch that are going to talk more about this system, but make sure that you're following that system that really, really works. Number 7, think of all selling as a sport. Sales is a sport. It's not personal. It's not about getting your feelings hurt. It's truly a sport. And the more you can start to think of it that way, the more successful you'll be. For example, I just had a salesperson who recently reached out to me on my forum and said, hey, you know what? I made a prospecting call to this prospect. And then what happened is they actually blocked my number. So the next time I called, it went straight to voicemail. And I've noticed that my calls have been just immediately getting redirected to voicemail. In fact, he was so curious that he actually called from his cell phone just to test, and he determined that, yes, he was in fact blocked by that prospect. And the salesperson was really upset about this. He was deeply hurt by the fact that someone would actually block his call. And he said, how am I supposed to deal with this? And I said, the first thing you need to do is make sure that you don't take any of this stuff personal. It is a sport, just like anything else, whether it's football or tennis or golf, right? When you have a setback, you don't get mad or throw your club and get really upset. Although I know there are some people who do that. I actually have a friend who throws his clubs every time he makes a bad shot. He's taking it personally as opposed to just thinking of it as the sport that it actually is. And the more comfortable we get really seeing sales as a sport, the less likely we are to take those little setbacks as personal. The more likely we are to reframe a bad rejection as, you know what, hey, that one didn't work out. I'm going to move on to the next because you know what, it's just a sport. It doesn't matter. Number 8, celebrate even your small successes. If you're watching this video and you're really feeling down, you're feeling like, you know what, I'm just not sure if I'm going to make it. You know, we've all been there. And one thing that I find is that sometimes when we get to the bottom of the curve of motivation, when we're really feeling demotivated and we're just not feeling it anymore, we start to even those little successes to start to overlook those and focus more on what's not working. And what I challenge you to do is, again, reframe what a success really means. I want you to start to recognize even a small success, like a meeting scheduled, or even just getting a call through for the next minute, right? If you can keep a prospect on for a minute on the phone, that means that you are much more likely to ultimately get that meeting. So let's just say that you get 5 prospects to stay on the phone for a minute. Chances are, out of those 5 prospects, one of them is going to turn into a meeting. So even just the act of getting a prospect to stay on the phone with you for over a minute is a success. Celebrate those small successes. And I don't mean celebrate by going and, taking the whole family out to a steakhouse, but I mean just give yourself the credit. You know what? Hey, that went well. Or if a prospect responds to an email, that went well. Celebrate that success in your head. Of course, don't then say, oh, okay, well, I'm going to take the day off. No. Recognize that it's a small success and then move on and feel that momentum as a result of that little success. Number 9, examine your setbacks. Now, this can be taken the wrong way, just the same way the previous idea can also be taken the wrong way. We've got to remember that just because we have a setback, it's not something to be upset about. Instead, what we want to do is we want to learn from those setbacks. Some people might call it a failure. I genuinely do not believe that you can fail in sales. The only way you fail in sales is if you quit, right? If you decide, I'm going into operations and I'm going to make half as much money as I know that I can make in sales, then you have failed. But until you do that, you have not failed. You're only experiencing setbacks. And anytime you have a setback, it's a learning opportunity. It's an opportunity to really analyze what happened. Why did that prospect respond in such a negative way? Or why did that sale that seemed like it was on track suddenly fall off track? Now, we don't want to necessarily over-examine what went wrong or what went right, but the more we're using a system, the more likely we are to really be able to effectively examine those individual setbacks, right? You may get to a sale and then suddenly you determine that, I really wasn't talking to the right decision maker. Now you understand that the next time you're in that situation, you're going to be really tough on the decision-making process, and you really want to understand. Or maybe you have to dig into budget more, or whatever it is. Examine those setbacks, and don't think of them as, how do I necessarily get this sale back on track, although you can do that as well. But it's also, how can I take away something that I can then use into my next situation? Examine those setbacks, take lessons from whatever it is that you've gotten out of it, and then apply it moving forward. Number 10, focus on small steps consistently. This is really true of success in any level, whether it's a kid getting through school or an adult just working on developing their own career or sales. We tend to really think in terms of big chunks, right? Take the example of a kid wanting to get into college, right? By the time they're a junior in high school, the battle has basically already been won or lost. It's already been determined. Really, what matters in terms of getting into, let's say, an elite college is what were they doing along the way in 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th grade that then put them in place to effectively get into whatever school it is they want. And it's those small baby steps, right? It's, did they finish their homework? Did they put in that extra effort on that assignment? It's little steps in aggregate that lead to ultimately success. And that's the same thing in sales, right? When it comes to selling, it's those little steps. It's, did you make your 40 calls each day? Right? And so what we need to think about is, did you make those 40 calls today? Not did you make your 1,600 calls this past month. It's, did you make your 40 calls today? Or did you set your 8 meetings this week? Right? If you're not setting your 8 meetings, then you're not going to be successful in the long run. We need to focus on the small steps. So that means today, I need to ensure that I'm setting 2 meetings as a result of the efforts that I'm putting in. The more you can break things down into small, tiny, bite-sized chunks, the more likely you're going to be successful in the long run. Because any success is just a combination of small, baby steps put together, and then in aggregate, it turns into something really powerful. Number 11, take risks and scrape your knees. So many salespeople are so afraid of making mistakes when they're in selling situations. And of course, if you're a newbie, that's unequivocally going to happen. But the more you can start to recognize that, if you mess up an opportunity, it's not a big deal, the more likely you are to be successful. I want to see you taking more risks. I want to see you falling on your face. I want to see you piss off that prospect. I want to see you do things because you took calculated risks that are going to turn into something. And that doesn't mean that just because a prospect doesn't respond the way you want and you get angry and huffy. No. What I mean is, let's say a prospect is behaving in a way that really doesn't make sense. Be willing to take a risk and say, you know what, George, based on what you're telling me, I'm getting the sense that this isn't a fit. Is that fair? And let them see like, whoa, I didn't expect that, right? That's a risk because it's within the system. It's calculated, and it's likely to actually generate a really effective response on the part of the prospect. Be willing to take those risks. And you know what? Yeah, you are going to scrape knees. I remember some of the early risks that I took when I really started selling with a system, with an effective approach, and I got kicked out of people's offices. I got yelled at on the phone. But you know what? I also made sales. And so, no, do we want to be making every single person we get in front of angry? No, of course not. But what we do want to do is take these consistent, calculated risks that are going to ultimately pay off. And by the way, you're never going to understand what's the edge, how far can I go? You'll never know how far you can go until you take those risks. So be willing to take those risks, and yeah, you're going to scrape a couple knees, whatever. So there are 11 sales motivation ideas to get you to make that next call. I want to hear from you. Which of these ideas do you find most useful? Be sure to share below in the comment section to get involved in the conversation. And if you enjoyed this video, then I have an awesome free ebook on 25 tips to crush your sales goal. Just click the image right here to get it instantly. Seriously, just click right here. Also, if you got some value, please like this video on YouTube and be sure to subscribe to my channel by clicking right here to get access to a new video just like this one each week.